So welcome to Who Are We, the Oppenheimer Society's session on figuring out who are the 20 over 20s in the Heimers. I'm here with Seth Watkins, which begs the big question, how do people know you?
Well, I guess things I've written and some of my work as an advocate for regenerative agriculture, for our environment, for cleaner water for Iowa, for, I guess in a nutshell, just protecting the natural resources we all depend upon but tend to ignore.
Right now, if I'm understanding correctly, you're the proprietor of Pinhook Farm down in Clarinda, Iowa, and you're striving to be one of the only true net zero farms out of a proper cattle operation. Is that still what's happening, or what's going on with Pinhook Farm?
Since I was a little kid, I don't want to use the word obsessed, but I've been concerned about our addiction to fossil fuel. And I really like I like the lifestyle it's given me, but I know it's a finite resource. So I guess as long as I'm going, my goal is to build a carbon negative food system. And what's exciting is there's a lot of other people coming on board with this and seeing that it's not just rainbows and unicorns, it's something that can be done. And, I'll admit right now, I think I'd be silly not to add in, crude oil's trading at $24 a barrel, but it's not going to trade there for long. And we know that as our economies grow and as people use these things, this resource is, it's going to become more and more expensive, and it's more and more expensive to get out of the ground.
So I guess it's always hard because some people, they sort of enjoy their job and such, but some people always still say, I got a dream to do something. It's like if you could wake up tomorrow, do anything like money, price, none of that's an object, right? What would you wake up tomorrow and do?
I'd love to build and run a large-scale research farm to objectively study what we really are capable of when we talk about this. One of the problems as I see this movement toward regenerative ag is a lot of the universities have not bought in. They're, for whether it's politics or whatever reasons, they're very production focused. And even Iowa State, which is this great institution, they've got 14,000 acres of farmland, and they are farming in a manner that does not even meet the nutrient reduction standard for our water that they've been tasked with teaching us how to do. So, that's like the low-hanging fruit. But you look at it, and I sit down and say, the state of Iowa imports 90% of our food. And I look at us saying, we are this incredible resource. We can have production on, it's using each acre to the most appropriate and best use instead of just saying we're going to put it all in corn and soy and allow subsidies to make up the difference. I want to see if I could build a farm that shows what we're capable of, what we can raise, how much food we can raise an acre, and at the same time do it in a manner that puts more carbon back into the soil than we emit raising that food. And we're seeing all these examples that it's possible, but we're not taking it up in a model or taking it to scale to help us plan for the future. Looking back, looking at what we're dealing with this deal on the COVID-19 crisis with our packing plants and some of those things, I'm a big fan of modeling works. And I'm sitting back saying, we have all this data, we have all this research. Why weren't we doing models to maybe alert us to the what if factors of some of the things we're doing? And when people did do models that showed things we didn't like to hear, and I'm going to see things I don't like to hear either as I would build this farm, why weren't we able to put our personal feelings aside and learn from it instead of trying to use politics to just destroy the person that had the bad message? So my dream is to have a large-scale research farm where not just researching corn and soy, but my God, tree crops and forage and grazing and starting the interaction of people, people connecting people to the land. Even things when I look at, and I'm picking on Iowa State here again, which I love that institution, but wouldn't it make sense that a land-grant institution could maybe raise the food for their students? Just a silly idea. Or maybe we have this great popularity of farm to table. Wouldn't it be cool if you went to an Iowa State football game and instead of eating, this frickin' junk food shit. You could actually go out and have something that the students raised on Iowa State land that would be this great meal with your concessions. So I guess that'd be farm to field, but farm to concessions and it would be a great revenue source too. But it's really concerning to me to kind of see where our food system's gone and know the potential we hold and what we could do with it. So that would be my dream.
I got 1,000 questions. I know we've only supposed to have 4, but I guess the first one is, so let me break down a few. You identified that we import 90% of our food, which blows my friggin' mind. My first question is, like, how much that we produce actually gets used? So if we only have 10% we're using, I mean, what fraction of what we make is that? The next one is, if we actually did build this farm, if I was like, let's take the first step where Iowa State actually got sustainable on how it created food for its operations, the dorm food, instead of buying the Cisco truck, we actually really did run that farm, and people who took agrarian science and worked for USDA there actually did grow that and raise that. How much land do we need? Like, what is the need of that? How much do we need to do?
This is where Iowa has a great angle. So, a couple of challenges with raising vegetables. Keep in mind, like the Simi Valley in California raises most of our produce, which is working, but it's highly reliant on fossil fuel, on chemicals. They do that because it's arid, so they turn the water on and off when they have to harvest, when they don't have to harvest. So we have some challenges, but our soil is much better than theirs. So what we need, we have a lot of the technology. Then this is the thing that's frustrating. There's people at Ames at Iowa State that know how to do these things. We just need to let them do their jobs is what we really need to do. And I get a little bit even far out there. I mean, I look at our global population does scare me, but I start looking at how we utilize things. Part of it is just using geospatial technology, saying, you know what, corn and soy are miraculous, and I'm very thankful for them, but they weren't meant to be on every acre. And it's doing an overlay of the 14,000 acres that university, that institution has, and saying, this land, you're farming it, and you're losing $600 an acre farming it, but you're making that up off a subsidy. Let's put something else there and see what we could do. Or, this is a little, some people might laugh. I mean, I remember walking through Paris and seeing goats graze along the parkway going to the Eiffel Tower. And I think about a university campus, I love landscaping, but there's nothing wrong with an edible landscape. And there's ways we can incorporate that. There's ways we can incorporate some small scale livestock in some of those areas instead of running the lawnmower. It might not be the perfectly manicured lawn, but it'd be kind of fun to watch a goat out your window on a rough afternoon. So I guess that would be in the range of maybe out there but feasible. At the same time, there's a very practical range in there of saying, what should we be doing here to make this work out for our communities, to help us grow, to help us be strong. We have food deserts in rural Iowa. We have food deserts in parts of Des Moines. We have food deserts in parts of Waterloo, parts of Cedar Rapids, some more bigger cities too. How can we start to, and the beauty of Des Moines or Cedar Rapids or some of those areas, they've got really good soil. Can we do something a little differently so that everyone can have access to really good, healthy, nutritious food and work on that? Can we work with the Department of Education? So, when you look at how constricting some of the rules on the standards set for our public schools are, can we work with the Department of Ed to have raising food for your school be part of your curriculum if it's done right? There's some ways we can do this, but we have to be mindful that we're not doing these things because of some policy that was set for some reason or another, but we have to be mindful of how do we build this thing and make it better? How do we continue to make this system better?
So if you're in charge of the world, right? You're the big boss. You just snap your fingers and anything is different. Like, not like Thanos style, but like, useful style. Like, what are the 3 things you attack first? I mean, because this sounds like a massive picture. Where do you go first? Like, what are the 3 things you change if you could just do anything for greatest impact?
Well, I'm assuming everyone's going to cure COVID-19. So that's one, but I'm going to give you 3 more. That's just not even out there. But anyway,
we're on track. We've got it under control. Everything's going to go to 0 soon. So miraculous.
So Something I've become aware of, and people say it differently, is that in our country is that this polarization between self-interest and common good. I say is that the difference between citizenship and consumerism. The first thing I'd like to do, if I could be king for a day, is that we prioritize our most vulnerable citizens and make sure we actually care for them properly. So I'm talking about nursing homes, people with learning disabilities, people with mental disabilities, people with physical disabilities. I want to live in a world where I go to visit a nursing home, that it smells good and the food is so good I want to go back there and eat with my loved one. I want to go to a place like that where the people the cleaning staff or the aides or some of those people that we take for granted are actually considered the top dogs and paid accordingly. So I think there's something to say about humanity and the way we conduct ourselves. To me, to see that issue, I have my son with special needs. I look at things like Henry's Turkeys in Iowa. I look at what's going on at the Glenwood Resource Center. That's a total failure of humanity, what we're allowing to happen there. And I think as our country, as our world gets bigger and bigger, the very first thing is that we make sure, going back again, our most vulnerable citizens, those who can't advocate for themselves, have to be those that are taken care of the very best. So there's one. Number two, we talked about this earlier, but if I could be, I want to change our country's ag policy, our farm bill, from focusing on production to focusing on stewardship and regeneration of the resources we depend upon, so that we've got a bright future for others. And then I'm sorry, but I don't know if it's because I'm an Aquarius or I love swimming or I love the oceans, but I want to ban single-use plastic and get it out of our oceans forever. And I want to use ag products to replace that with renewables. So kind of corny, but I've seen it, and those are three things that I think would make the world a better place.
It's sort of interesting that the first one fundamentally just comes down to providing a livable environment in a in a healthcare service. That that one doesn't seem like you should need to be king of the world to get that one fixed.
No, all of us should see it that way.
That one seems like that seems remarkably attainable.
Mm-hmm. The single-use plastics is going to be tough, but we got to do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, the COVID thing right now, right? I mean, you no longer can take in your own bags into the store. I mean, we're back to single-use plastic out of really a health policy necessity. It's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got friends in California who are like blown away by now. They're going to the grocery store and coming out with 30 plastic bags. I mean, it's hurtful to some people. They got used to switching. Interesting. Well, in the spirit of Oppenheimers, what is your most innovative failure?
Well, I've got two, and we're going to check one in a minute. The first one was I got really gung-ho raising hogs in a deep-bedded system, and it was wonderful. The hogs were happy. There was no odor whatsoever, and it worked really well, but it was because I kept the stocking rate down and was very careful, let them rest, all those things. It was a colossal failure because I probably should have run twice as many pigs in a building, and then corn went up to $5 or $6 a bushel, and that didn't work. But it was neat in seeing how well they performed with that kind of lifestyle. Now the other, I'm going to check right now. So wait right there, and I'm going to see how it turned out. And the other is a vodka tonic popsicle, which the popsicle's in there, but it did not come out. It didn't. So it's not quite there, but I think we're onto something. So the vodka tonic popsicle and the deep bedded hogs. The vodka tonic popsicle can work.
You better be careful, because I think a bunch of people are going to start freezing White Claw soon if you make
That's the total decline of Western civilization.
Well, I mean, it's Yeah, it's definitely the decline of letting your kids in the freezer, that's for sure. So, otherwise, you end up ruining it. So, I apologize. Tell me more about the hog story. What do you mean when you're setting them up? What would mean? What? I apologize for not fully knowing all the jargon there. What was the setup like? What was different about it? And I assume the corn price was a function of the fact you now can't feed them effectively at that rate. Is that right?
Yep. So for me, not all my peers share this feeling, but I've always believed that all animals do have some rights, not like a Bill of Rights, but the right to express their natural instincts. So, for cattle, that's to graze. For chickens, it's to peck and scratch around the dirt. For hogs, it's to be where they see sunlight and they can get in the mud and do things like that. So I understand why we have confinement. I understand the arguments for it. But I've always been bothered by it because I think it denies a pig its natural right to root in the mud and, bask and enjoy some, they're an incredibly smart animal. Look a pig in the eye someday and it's incredible. It'll really get you. And I started messing around with hoop buildings, and they were neat. And deep bedding, which is, you take some of the stover and things like that off your cornfield and you put it in this building. The pigs use, it's manure, and then you keep it fresh. You always keep fresh bedding on, so it makes this great organic mass of stuff. And then you spread it back on the fields. But the dilemma is that the people that really pitched it neglected to mention that the way you really make a hoop building work is you pack it just as tight as you would pack a confinement barn. And, I've got, you've heard me talk about it, but I've got this, I truly believe agriculture is an art and a science. And if you look at something that doesn't feel right, or it doesn't smell right, or, in your heart or in your gut, it just doesn't feel right, then you don't do it. And then you use the scientific part of your brain to explain why. And I could just never bring myself to fill those buildings as full as the consultants would tell me to. I'm like, this just, I wouldn't want to be a pig in that building when it's that full. I want to be a pig in the building when it's like mine, where it's nice. Mm-hmm. And long story short, I lost some money on the project, but I always felt kind of good. And I've got some pictures of the pigs when they were in there. I always felt good seeing them in there. It was a nice place to visit. And I hope that we can move to a system where some of those things I did make more sense. One of the beauties of it is the pigs weren't stressed out, so I had no health problems. I didn't, all these things we're facing, and I'm not going to downplay them at all, but when you look at some of the diseases we're facing in livestock, it's from stress. And as our bodies are stressed and things like that, for things we have vaccines for, I'm not talking about things we don't, but things we have treatment for. If you raise the stress level, you're going to raise, you decrease your immunity. So anyway, I loved it. I loved going up to it, but at the end of the day, the way I managed it was one that was not going to meet at least the standards of the livestock industry 15 years ago. It doesn't mean that maybe it won't work at some point in the future. So I still want to have a few pigs around on the farm, but I just can't do it the way I see a lot of people doing it right now.
Well, those are the 4 questions. So, I mean, we're at that point, but I've got like a few sort of like after hours questions I'm actually intrigued by on this agriculture side. So we'll identify, this is the hard stop for what we've promised. Okay. But